Many people think they're good, when in truth they're just trying to please everyone so they'll be liked. They don't live by principle, they live in reaction, reacting to others' expectations, to the fear of being disliked, to the habit of staying silent in the face of what's wrong. A truly good person doesn't need validation. He doesn't need praise, doesn't need pity, and definitely doesn't need the crowd's approval. He only needs one thing: to live by what he believes is right, even if it costs him. This video is about 7 signs that you're not just a good person, but a strong one. A person with a core. If you're sick of fake kindness, watch until the end, because what comes next will force you to confront yourself. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and like if you're new here. It helps me keep bringing you more valuable content. Mark was a man so ordinary, he was almost invisible. 38 years old, living alone in a rundown rental on the outskirts of Cleveland. 10-hour shifts at a shipping warehouse, followed by cheap meals, cold showers, and sleep. He had few friends, no social media, and absolutely zero concern for what others thought of him. Mark's life was a loop of dull repetition that most men would call failure. Divorced 3 years ago, 2 kids living with his ex in Dayton. He saw them once a month if she allowed it. He never complained, never vented, just worked. Sent money. No thanks, no recognition. One rainy night while doing end-of-shift inventory, Mark noticed an envelope under the desk. Inside, a thick stack of crisp $100 bills. He knew who it belonged to. A young new guy known for being forgetful. No one else was around. The cameras didn't reach that spot. It was late. No eyes on him. $4,000. For a lot of people, that's a gift from fate. A chance to take back what life took. For a broke man drowning in rent debt, it was a fast escape from the trap. But Mark didn't need a reason. He walked the envelope to security, left a note. Someone dropped this. Please return it. No one knew. No one applauded. The next morning, the young guy found the envelope back at his station. Panic turned to disbelief, then tears. He found Mark and asked, "Why didn't you keep it?" No one would have known. Mark shrugged. No explanation needed. He knew keeping it might have made life easier for a few days, but he'd lose something far more important. The one thing that had kept him grounded through years of darkness, his own self-respect. Being kind when people are watching is easy. Doing the right thing when no one sees, no one knows, and there's no reward. That's the choice of a disciplined soul. That night, Mark went home like always. Cold dinner, single bed, long silence. But when he looked in the mirror for the first time in months, he didn't hate the man staring back. No spotlight, no applause, just enough silence to hear the voice of his conscience. Six months after the envelope incident, Mark was reassigned. No warning, no real explanation. A new manager, 10 years younger than Mark, freshly promoted from corporate planning, came into the warehouse like a king, overhauling everyone's shifts without asking a single question. Mark had long settled into the night shift. It was the only time he felt peace. No noise, no stares, no one prying into his life. But now he was forced onto mornings, clocking in at 4:30 a.m., stuck in traffic, working under fluorescent lights, surrounded by yelling and micromanagement from a guy who'd never lifted anything heavier than a tablet. Most of the crew protested. Some yelled, others filed for transfers or quit. But Mark? He nodded, accepted the shift, and showed up on time. No complaints, no venting. But that didn't mean he wasn't angry. Deep down, he knew this wasn't fair. He knew that manager didn't like him, maybe because of the envelope incident, or maybe because his silence made people uncomfortable. But Mark said nothing, didn't blame anyone, didn't dump his frustration on the people around him. One day during break, a younger coworker leaned over and asked, "You don't feel like you're getting screwed? If I were you, I'd slam the damn table and quit." Mark looked at him for a long second, then replied in a low, worn voice, "What you call getting screwed might just be life testing whether I live by principle or emotion. And if I walk out because I'm offended, doesn't that mean my whole life can be controlled that easily?" The kid said nothing. Mark took a sip of his lukewarm coffee, stood up, and went back to work. Nothing more needed to be said. The truth is, Mark hadn't always been this way. 5 years ago, when his wife left, he spent months blaming her. blamed the job, blamed his in-laws, blamed America itself. But eventually he realized, no one cares. And even if they did, no one else could live his life for him. Stoicism teaches, when something makes you suffer, split it in two, what you can control and what you can't. Mark couldn't control the manager's attitude, couldn't control younger men being given higher chairs, but he could control how he responded. And that's where he put his focus. Not because he was weak, but because he understood. Complaining is a form of dependence. And blaming is the surrender of your own authority. That morning, after finishing his new shift, Mark went home. Eyes bagged from lack of sleep, arms sore from constant lifting. He passed by the mirror like always, but this time he stopped. Not to admire, just to confirm something, that no matter how much the world tried to move him, he still ruled himself. And that's something no one can take from you, unless you hand it over. One bitter winter morning, Mark arrived at the warehouse as usual and saw a notice pinned to the board. Warehouse restructuring. Some positions will be reduced. The words were printed in that familiar corporate font, cold, sterile, indifferent. No one said much, but the air in the room dropped like a death sentence had just been handed out. Mark wasn't the first to be called to HR, but he wasn't surprised when his name made the list. The HR rep, a young woman in a pricey sweater and a rehearsed smile, told Mark he'd receive 3 months severance and a professional reference. Everything was clean, efficient, like his life was just another file to be closed in proper order. Mark didn't ask why, didn't protest. He signed the paper, nodded, and walked out with a calm that unsettled the very person delivering the blow. Outside, the Ohio wind sliced through the air. Light snow fell. The road shimmered with ice. But Mark didn't curse, didn't yell about how unfair life was. He didn't call anyone to complain. Didn't post a "taking time to find myself" update. He just went home, hung up his coat, sat at his old wobbly table, and opened his notebook to rework his budget. Mark used to be the kind of man modern society loves, the guy who knows how to vent at the right time, label himself a victim of circumstances, and share motivational posts about rising after the fall. But years of silence, divorce, unnoticed work, and being left behind had taught him one truth: blaming never moves you forward. It just helps you feel less ashamed while standing still. Mark knew the world owed him nothing. No one was responsible for pulling him out of the hole. And if he chose to lie there and feel sorry for himself, that was a choice, not a destiny. So instead of whining, he took a job at a small woodworking shop a few blocks from home. The work was harder, the pay was lower, but no one made him fake smiles and no one barked orders. Most importantly, it was work he chose, work he owned. 3 weeks later, Mark was having his usual fried egg dinner when his 11-year-old son called on video. The boy, his spitting image, asked in a worried voice, "Dad, Mom said you lost your job. Are you okay?" Mark looked into his son's eyes through the screen, held the silence, then replied, "Yeah, I lost my job, but I'm okay. I'm still working, still sending money, and I'm still your dad. That doesn't change." The boy smiled and said, "I believe you." Before ending the call, Mark put the phone down, leaned back in his chair, and exhaled, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of knowing he'd just taught his son something important. We don't get to choose our circumstances, but we do get to choose how we live inside them. Playing the victim is easy. Everyone knows how to complain. But choosing not to, even when you have every right to, that's strength forged in hardship. That's how a man rebuilds the one thing the world can't give him: respect for himself. A month later, Mark was invited to a reunion with a group of guys from the old warehouse. They met at a small bar on the east side of the city. Cheap beer, wobbly tables, and that faint haze of cigarette smoke clinging to the ceiling. Mark showed up on time, wearing the same worn-out coat and scuffed shoes. No performance, no pretending. At first, the atmosphere was friendly. Laughter echoed as they recalled old stories. Someone slipping and face-planting into a pallet, those freezing lunches in the break room, the time the whole warehouse called in sick when the heater died. But it didn't take long for the reunion to slide exactly where Mark knew it would go, into a spiral of blame and bitterness. One guy threw his legs up on the table, downed his beer, and snapped, "Those corporate assholes tossed us out like trash." Another jumped in, voice sharp with resentment. "We were workhorses, and they slaughtered us without blinking." A former floor lead slammed his fist against the wood. "If I had the chance, I'd sue the hell out of them. No ethics, none." Mark sat silently, not because he agreed, but because he was waiting for the right moment, and it came when someone turned to him. "What about you? You've been quiet. You siding with them?" Mark set his beer down, looked up, and said with slow, steady force, "I'm not siding with anyone, but we're not kids. We can't keep blaming everyone else the moment life doesn't go our way." Silence hit the table. One guy let out a dry laugh. "What, so we can't even be mad about getting fired?" Mark scanned their faces, then spoke again. "I got fired too. But let's be honest, was anyone here truly surprised? That warehouse was bleeding money for a year. We all knew it. And during that time, did anyone actually try to learn something new? Did anyone ask, what if I get let go? What's next? Or did we just complain during break and wait for a miracle?" Brows furrowed. A few looked away, but Mark didn't stop. "I don't blame the company. It's not their job to save me, and I'm not cursing anyone out. I take responsibility for how unprepared I was, and I think anyone here with guts should do the same." No one replied, not because they had nothing to say, but because no one expected the truth to come from one of their own. Not a boss, not some life coach. A guy who used to sweat beside them, shoulder to shoulder. After a moment, someone muttered an excuse to hit the restroom. A few others buried themselves in their phones, avoiding Mark's gaze, and he understood. Truth, even when it's right, always has a cost. On the way out, one of the younger guys, Leo, caught up to Mark. "What you said, I've never even let myself think like that. I always blamed the system, blamed everybody else. But now, maybe I need to look in the mirror." Mark nodded and answered simply, "The truth's not easy to hear, but it's the only thing that'll save you from yourself." That night, Mark went home and jotted down a few lines in his notebook. Not to record an argument, but to solidify a truth. Telling it like it is, even if it earns you enemies, is what a responsible man does. Not everyone has the spine for it, but anyone who wants to grow has to learn how to stand in the heat of honesty. One April afternoon, Mark was waiting for the bus after his shift at the woodshop when his phone buzzed. It was his ex-wife. She rarely called. Their communication was usually short, cold, and limited to texts. Two people who had long since let go of hope. The sudden call sent a chill through his gut. "Mark, I have to say this quick. Alex was in a bike accident. He's in the ER. I'm at the hospital. Can you come?" No questions, no panic. Mark just said, "I'm on my way," and hung up. He called his supervisor, said he had to leave, and caught the next bus into the city. The ride took over an hour. Traffic was brutal. His mind stayed blank the entire way. No spiraling thoughts, no panic, no cursing the sky. He knew one thing: falling apart wouldn't help. If he wanted to show up for his son, he had to stay calm. By the time he arrived, Alex had been moved to observation. No life-threatening injuries, but a fractured arm and mild concussion. His ex-wife sat slumped in a hallway chair, eyes red, face pale. When she saw Mark, she stood up and murmured, "I'm sorry for calling you like that. I didn't know what else to do." Mark didn't say a word. He stepped past her, looked through the glass, and saw his son asleep, arm in a cast, chest rising steadily. In that moment, the weight of everything collapsed on him. Years of grinding work, broken dreams, endless fatigue, all crashing in like a quiet storm. But he didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't blame anyone. Not his son for being careless, not the job he missed, not the way life had unfolded. He just stood there, took a deep breath, and told himself, "Inhale with reason, exhale with reason. You're here, you still have something to do." That wasn't coldness. That was Mark refusing to be pulled into the emotional undertow. He understood something most men never learn. If fear takes over, you stop acting like a man, and his son didn't need a man falling apart. He needed someone solid to lean on. Hours later, the doctor came out with good news. Mark nodded, no smile, just softened eyes. When allowed in, he rested a hand on his son's forehead and whispered, "Dad's here." The boy stirred, nodded slightly, and drifted back to sleep. No more words were needed. On the ride home, His ex sat beside him on the bus. After a long pause, she said, "You never lose your temper. No matter what happens, you're always quiet. How do you do that?" Mark kept his eyes on the window and answered without turning. "Because there's a lot in life that still needs to be managed. And if I can't manage my emotions, how the hell am I supposed to manage anything else?" She said nothing. The bus rolled slowly through streets glowing with yellow light. That night, Mark added a new page to his notebook. "The day my son fell. The day I didn't fall with him. Not because I didn't feel it, but because he needed someone who wouldn't." Some people are swept away by the flood of emotion. Others stand in the middle of it without letting it drown them. Strength isn't the absence of feeling. It's feeling everything and choosing not to be ruled by any of it. Three weeks after his son was discharged from the hospital, Mark was back to his routine. Night shifts at the wood shop, sending money home on schedule, visiting his son on weekends when his ex-wife allowed. Life hadn't gotten any easier. But something had shifted, quietly. Mark had started acting with a new direction. One early Sunday morning, fresh off a long shift and pedaling home through the cold, Mark didn't go to sleep like usual. Instead, he opened his beat-up laptop, bought secondhand off Facebook Marketplace, and typed in, "What to do if you have no degree, no experience, but don't want to lift boxes forever." The results poured in. Online courses, tech skills, coding, project management, electronics repair, even writing. Mark skipped the shiny stuff. He wasn't interested in the get-rich-in-30 days garbage pumped out on social media. What he needed was a road. Not fast, just real. Eventually, he enrolled in a course on small appliance repair, rice cookers, drills, vacuums, the kind of junk most Americans toss the second it breaks. Opportunity if you know how to fix it. The course was cheap, online, and hands-on from home. Mark cut out all unnecessary spending. Beer, takeout, cable TV. He bought broken appliances on eBay just to take them apart. Once, he shorted out a blender and filled the kitchen with smoke. But he didn't cuss, didn't slam the counter. He took it apart again and found the mistake. While others spent their time whining about inflation, gas prices, or wages, Mark was learning to use a soldering iron. When his old warehouse buddies got together to vent about their bosses and the government, Mark stayed quiet, planning out his week, task by task. No motivational quotes, no inspirational posts, just work. Quiet, disciplined, no audience needed. A month in, a woman in the neighborhood, who'd heard about him through her daughter, asked if he could fix her vacuum. Mark took it, fixed it in 2 days, and tried to return it free of charge. But the woman handed him $20. Good work should be paid for. Don't live like you have to suffer to be a good man, son. He accepted the money. For the first time in months, Mark realized that his value didn't come from his old job or anyone's opinion. It came from one thing. He was acting, day by day, to rebuild his life on his terms. Instead of waiting for luck, he made himself useful. Instead of whining about life being unfair, he asked himself what he'd done today to make it better than yesterday. And instead of hoping someone else would open the door, he picked up a screwdriver, unhinged the damn thing, and started building his own. One stormy night, the power flickered across his apartment complex. A neighbor called, "Wet circuit panel." Mark fixed it in 15 minutes. When the lights came back on, the man shook his hand and said, "You're not like the rest. No whining, just action." Mark just smiled. Not out of pride, but because he had one clear thought running through his head. Action is the only thing that gets me out of the hole. Complaining just keeps me sitting in it longer. Nearly 8 months after getting laid off from the warehouse, Mark's life looked different, not richer, but clearer, steadier. He still lived in the same small apartment, still rode his bike to work when needed. But now, he had something more, a small side hustle fixing household appliances. No storefront, no flashy marketing, just word of mouth, a few extra $100 a month, but more importantly, Mark no longer felt like society's leftover. But here's the thing. When you start to change, some people won't like it. Old friends from the bar started whispering behind his back. Mark's changed. He's acting all serious, cold as hell now. A few distant relatives threw shade too. Why is he so closed off? What's the point of all that repair stuff? Why not ask someone for help? Get a real job. Mark heard it. Of course he did. But he didn't respond. He was used to people getting uncomfortable when he didn't play by their rules. One Saturday afternoon, during a simple birthday gathering for his son, Mark brought the cake. A cousin, one of those loud real estate guys, looked him over and sneered, "You're still making a living fixing little gadgets? Ever thought of getting back into the real market?" Mark smiled, then dropped a line that silenced the room. "I don't live for your approval, and I sure as hell don't choose my path to make you comfortable." He didn't raise his voice. He wasn't angry. But the words hit like stone, not because they insulted anyone, but because they spoke the truth no one likes to face. You don't owe the world your comfort. Mark didn't need to make everyone happy. He understood something most people never will. If you spend your life trying to please everyone, you'll end up wearing 1,000 masks. One for relatives who want success, one for fake friends who want nice, one for manipulators who want compliant. And when you strip off all those masks, you're left with nothing but a hollow shell. So Mark lived his own way. He taught his son that not everyone needs to understand you, and you don't need to argue for their acceptance. He chose fewer words, more action. And most importantly, he chose to live in a way that let him look in the mirror every night and not hate the man staring back. One late night, while fixing an old lawnmower for a neighbor, the old man said, "You're not the friendliest guy, but I trust you." Mark nodded. That was enough. He didn't need applause. He didn't need a social media post celebrating him. Being understood is nice, but living in alignment with your values? That's non-negotiable. This world is full of people who spend their lives chasing approval from the crowd, only to reach the end and realize they never really lived for themselves. Mark wasn't famous. He didn't need to be remembered. He was just a man who walked quietly through the storm, stayed rational, lived by principle, and bowed to no one's expectations but his own. And in that, he was free. Mark wasn't a hero. He didn't conquer the world. He just conquered himself, day by day, in silence, without needing a spotlight. None of his moments were Instagram-worthy, but every action was living proof of a Stoic truth. You don't need an easy life. You need an unshakable will. These 7 signs won't make you a good man by society's standards. They'll make you the kind of man you respect. The man who's not fake, who doesn't blame, who doesn't play the victim, who doesn't compromise with what's wrong just to be accepted. You don't need pity, you don't need praise. You just need to live in a way that lets you look in the mirror at the end of the day and say, "I didn't hide, I lived right." This world doesn't lack people who sound kind. What it lacks are men who stand firm in silence. If you're one of them, you're already living a life worth respecting. Even if no one's clapping for you, thank you for being here. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.